Hi, I'm Carol Brewer, and I have the honor and privilege to be sitting next to Gretchen Ryan, who is an artist in Sacramento. And I just want to have Gretchen speak a little bit about her past before we go on to her present. We were in her studio visiting her, and we were discussing some furniture, a piece of stained glass, and would you please take us down memory lane about those times in Germany when you and your husband were walking to Checkpoint Charlie?
Yeah, that was approximately in 1950, or was it already 52? And we were, I need to start at the beginning. My uncle who and my aunt, they brought me up, and my uncle worked in the telephone, central telephone thing in Telefunken. And then he got two American soldiers that were supposed to help him. And my uncle said to his wife, my aunt, why don't we invite those guys for dinner? Oh yeah, sure. And so they came, and one of them was my husband. And my aunt said, what, he can teach her English. I had English in college, but it's college English. So they said, sure. Well, do you think he did? He taught me English. So that is how we got to know each other. And my uncle regretted that he did that because I was the only one child with them. And I moved away, and they were alone. So he said, I wish I hadn't brought him in. So when I met my husband, a totally new world was opened for me, because I had been in the small village that I just visited again last year, and that village was 850 years old.
Wow.
Yes, and I grew up there as a child. But my uncle and my aunt brought me up because my parents started a business, so they were glad to be rid of me. And so we ended up in Berlin. And Berlin was a very, very wonderful, interesting city. And when our big boss, Mr. Hitler, was in, he took all of that away from us. But what happened was Berlin was the capital of Germany. And what he did is, it was also his place where he had his
Headquarters.
Headquarters. Yes. So it became more vulnerable to the enemy when the war started. And I need to go back. In 1936, actually that is when I think back where I really knew that I was an artist. Because to this day, I remember the atmosphere that the relatives and friends, they were gathering. And I didn't know, I was 7 years old. The war started 1936. So, as a kid, what's that? I mean, nothing is different. What's that?
Yeah.
So, what I do remember though is how the people, the elderly, and the regular working people, how they reacted to that news. The war has started. To this day, I remember it was overcast, it was already kind of gloomy, and I remember that feeling to this day when they declared war, but I had no idea what that meant at all at that time. I was 7 years old.
Oh my.
But I remember the atmosphere of the people who were there when we received the news. Of course, we heard only what Hitler wanted us to hear, and we only had radio
Oh.
at that time. And so whatever you heard on that radio is what he deemed we should know. Nothing about the rest of the world. So
Oh, that must have been hard.
so that was in 1936, and that's when I first, as I think back, that's when I first remembered atmosphere, feelings of the people who were there. I remember that. I still do. How it was, although I didn't know what that meant. I was a kid, but I could feel it from the rest of the older people that it was something important. I thought, oh, it's just the same old gray day. What's so important about that? Well, I found out really personally what that was about. So I was actually at my home in Niederschöner. It's a small village that's 850 years old. And then my uncle and my aunt kind of adopted me because my parents were starting a business, and that's how I happened to be in Berlin. And we had a wonderful time in Berlin
Right.
for a while, and then the bombing started. The war was beginning to be intense, and when the bombing started, what we had, our most important papers in a little suitcase, and every night at 12 o'clock, the sirens would go. That meant we had to go in the bunker, which was downstairs. And in there were all the people from the building, what do you call it, lots of apartments.
Mm-hmm.
And there were little babies, and there were old people, there were sick people, there were people who were loud, others who were quiet, and we all had to be in there during the bombings. And when it was over, the alarm would sound again, and we knew we could go up in our apartments. And the next day, we would walk and see the devastation. And when 7/11 happened, that gray powder, that stuff from the buildings falling down, it would happen then too, because all of our buildings were made of cement type of thing.
Gretchen, when Marie and I visited you in your studio, you were discussing your furniture, and I recognized this beautiful stained glass, and you told us the story about how you brought it to the United States. Can you share that with us?
Well, I brought it over first to West Berlin.
Oh.
Berlin was divided into 4 sections: the Russian section, the British section, the French, and then the American section. So Checkpoint Charlie was the place where you left the West Berlin side and go over to the east, but it was still Berlin. So a couple of friends and we went over, and it was amazing how the Americans knew where the antiques were. So we went to an antique store, and I saw the window that you saw, and I know it was an old one, and the person that sold it to me, but he said that was originally in a hall in the major, what do you call that, downtown Sacramento, the
Conventions Center?
the building that where everything is done, like Sacramento, the Capitol, right?
Oh,
right,
okay.
right.
Thank
Capitol
you. Yeah.
building.
Well,
It
we
was
needed
in the
that help.
Capitol
Yeah.
building, so it was a nice piece of Berlin, which and that was after I had already been to America.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that.
So, and when I went with
Mhm.
my friends, and they, of course, didn't speak German. I was the only one that spoke German, and the guy said, You don't have to act like you all don't understand. I know you speak German. So anyway, I bought this beautiful old piece of stained glass, and we could go over there with our car. And Checkpoint Charlie was watching when you left. They were watching that you were still there. So we thought we had a station wagon. We put it in the back and covered it up with a blanket. And somebody had bought a clock. So here's the stained glass window, here's the clock. So we put blanket over all. We get to the Russian checkpoint and we get stopped. And Checkpoint Charlie, they were watching. They didn't know what was going on. And they wouldn't let us go. They brought out mirrors. They went under the car, looked all under the car, went back in their hut, and wouldn't let us go. And I was like, 10 minutes, and we thought, what is going on? And Checkpoint Charlie was beginning to worry why they kept us. And
Oh, yeah.
those were East Germans. If they have to call a Russian, then it would become an international incident. And that would be bad for the guys, for my husband and my friends' husbands. So they kept on looking and checking. And 15 minutes under that stress is a long time. So we thought, what in the world? Well, they finally let us go. And they couldn't tell us anything. They couldn't say, open that blanket, move that. They could not speak to us. They were not allowed to speak to American citizens. So we get to Checkpoint Charlie. What in the world did you guys do? You got us almost into trouble. What did you do? What you got in your car? We showed him, opened the blanket and showed him. He said, why did they fuss over that? They thought it was a person. You see, at that time, anybody, even that's why they had the mirror under the car, people would hang on to underside a car just to get out of that Russian zone,
I'm sure
East
they
Germany.
did.
And they had suspected that there was a person in our back. So they kind of chewed us out. They said the next time leave it open so they can see what you've got.
Oh, I see.
But that's that was the incident that almost went wrong with that stained glass window. Yeah.
What I'm interested in now is how you got started painting watercolors and pen and ink.
I went, in Germany you do not go to school until you're 18. You only go until you're 14. Then you stop your regular school and decide whether you're going to get a job and learn a skill, or whether you go to higher learning. And so at 14 I started German college, because we don't wait until we're 18.
Good.
It's a lot better because you don't get into a lot of trouble because you have to learn. Well, the guys, but being in high school until 18, I don't know. So, what was that question again?
So you decided to go to a school for higher learning to learn.
Yeah. So I went to that school, and we didn't have art. We didn't have all the items that you offer, but we had. Aside from that, you could take an art class.
Oh, okay.
So that was 1944, I think. I was done in 48, yeah. And we took that art class because I had always been interested in art. And so we took from that teacher, and that's when I first started to actually paint and draw. But we didn't. You couldn't go to a store and get paint tubes of paint.
Oh my goodness!
It was pen and ink, pencil, and maybe if you. Actually, my father gathered. We had big woods near our place, and he gathered. I don't know what you call it here. A certain amount of wood. It's it's called
A stack?
well,
A
it's more than
cord? A
yeah,
cord?
right.
Okay.
And he actually traded that, which was a huge pile of wood, that for not pen and ink, but the new where you could write like what we have today.
Oh, markers or
A pen.
Pens, a
They
regular
didn't
pen.
have that.
oh, for heaven's sake.
I mean, they did, but you had to pay dearly for it. And for some black paint and a brush and stuff like that, you could not go to a store and get that.
Oh.
There were no art stores. So I used that to use for my art. And I also did a lot of sculptures, if you want to call it that. I made a dollhouse. But to me, it was not a dollhouse. It was, I put a light in there. My uncle back in Berlin, he added little electricity. And what intrigued me there is how the light came out of the dollhouse window and made a shadow. And I thought, that's interesting. So without any kind of technical help,
Yeah.
I
sounds
started
like
to watch and to see things and to feel things. Like we would go on a big field and the kids would play football and scream and run, and I would sit at the side and I'd take in the atmosphere again. That feeling can still
a
be
true
there.
artist.
Yeah.
Yes. Well said. When you came to Sacramento, when was that?
Oh, the first time? 68, I believe. He got stationed
Okay.
at
Your
McClellan.
husband, yeah.
Yeah. And that was the first time. And I was already teaching art at that time. Wherever I went with him, in Germany, if he was stationed someplace, or in France or wherever, I was always teaching classes already.
Oh my! And
So
so you
it's-
did get your, you actually became a teacher.
Yeah.
You
Yes,
had a
I have
degree in
I
education.
have a, right.
Here in the United States or in
Here.
Here. Okay.
Yeah, I got it.
And what was that? Was that for art? Teaching?
For art and
Oh.
general
General ed.
history and type of thing, yeah.
Oh, that is
Yeah.
fascinating. I didn't know that part of
I
that.
know a little bit about history. I felt it.
You're still teaching today.
Yeah.
In your studio.
Yes.
And you also teach how to make paper. Or you
Yes,
have.
yes.
You have. And so you want to talk a little bit about that?
Oh, yeah, the
Okay.
books. I have always extended my knowledge of, it's not just painting with oil or watercolor. There's sculpture in, other than metal sculpture or
Clay.
clay.
Yeah.
I got into handmade paper. I forgot even how I got into it. And I really, of all the mediums that I have used, I really fell in love with handmade paper. And the two books that are going to be on exhibition, the pages are all handmade. And what you can do with handmade paper, you're the boss. You can embed things into the paper. You can add flower petals or anything like that. And you can sculpt with it. Because when you make the paper and it isn't all dry, you can put it over a mask
Oh, for heaven's sake.
or over whatever is three-dimensional. And you get, if you do it carefully, you get three-dimensional sculptures out of paper. I have some of that in my
your
studio.
Yeah. I did.
And I had
Wonderful.
one guy in class who was kind enough to let us make a model of his face. We would actually put the stuff on his face. And I remember we had to put a straw into his mouth so he wouldn't and in his nose. And I still have that that sculpture, and we made that out of clay, and then you can drape the paper when you have to learn the right time when to use paper to sculpt with it. If you let it dry, then and then there were people and I taught that actually, what's that school called? Oh, they always employed teachers to teach.
Montessori school, or is it for children, or is it for children at the Montessori school?
No, it's on the big street. It's nothing but classes. I taught the paper making there.
We'll think of it. We'll think of it in a minute.
And people said, "Well, how do you make that paper that looks like paper?" I said, "You go and buy that. This is art paper, not paper that you can buy." So they wanted that flat and white. I said, "That's not
how you do it.
Art, that you can buy that paper." So you can make thick paper, you can embed things, you can put a sheet of paper down, and it's quite complicated. First you have to tear up the paper, you let it soak, and then you have to put it through a blender, and you can choose how well you blend it. The better you blend it, the smoother the paper. But that's not what I wanted. I wanted rough paper with things in it, as you can tell by...
Oh yeah, the books are wonderful.
Yeah. So I made a paper sculpture with it. And there is so much you can do with handmade paper. It's unbelievable. You can make books, you can make sculptures, you can things to hang on the wall, and it's one of my favorite mediums, handmade paper.
So how many years have you been with the Sacramento Fine Arts Center?
Oh, I'm the oldest member.
I wanted to know that. No, you're
yes,
so
I am the
young.
oldest
Are
member.
you? Are you?
Yeah.
Wow.
For years and years and years. When to Sacramento, and my husband was stationed at McClellan, I joined, and then we were going to France or someplace. But each time we came back, I would rejoin it. So I've been a member at least since '68 or more.
And the clubs within it, which clubs were you a member of?
The NCA.
NCA.
Yeah.
Which is
Yeah.
national.
Not the watercolor. I'm not a watercolorist.
California
But
artists.
I like NCA because we do everything. Sculpture, paintings, whatever.
Metal.
In art. Yeah.
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 So is there anything that you would like to say about art?
Yes. Yes. I love art.
Okay.
But he doesn't know it. No, but I discovered, as you get older, you can sit down and reflect on your life. I discovered that, and by teaching also, that you are born with a lump in your inside that says you are an artist. Because you cannot learn to become an artist. You can learn to be good at art. But I believe, from what I have seen through my teachings, that you have to be born with it.
Yeah, I believe that.
And then it's your passion. And if it's your passion, it's lifelong and health-giving and wonderful. And I mean, there's nothing better. I always tell my students, you're going to live a long, healthy life.
I think
Because
so.
art does that to you. I take my dog for a walk and I see things on the floor. Actually, the one book of history, part of that, the things that I found there on my walks with my dog are in that book.
Feathers.
Because it's laying around. It's all there, but you've got to see it. And when I started to teach at ARC, and people signed up for painting or whatever, I would say, "Welcome to learning how to see class." And they said, "Oh no, I was signed up for art." And the secret to being an artist is to be able to see. And I'm not talking about 20/20 vision.
Yeah.
Not at all. Because I need big fat glasses. That's not how you learn to see. You have to see with your inner, with your soul. You have to see what other people walk by. I ask people, you know what a rose looks like? Oh, sure. Oh, how about you draw one? They haven't looked at a rose. I mean, looking at a rose is not just having a bouquet of roses. Oh, yeah. No, it's actually not necessary taking it apart, but looking at how does it grow? How do the petals
Touch each
fit
other.
together? And so you have to be able with your eyes to take things apart to learn what makes them tick. So learning to see is one of the biggest positive things to be a good artist. If you can't see, and again, it's not 20/20, but if you can't see, you can't do it.
You know, Gretchen, I didn't know you had all that information in you. And I'm really, truly honored to have been sitting here with you today.
Oh,
And
I love art, and
love
I
you.
can talk for hours and hours and hours.
Okay. Thank you so much.
You're most welcome.
Okay.
When we first came